Welcome to the fifth and final episode in the series we're calling Finance Focus. I am again, for the fifth time, it won't be a surprise to you if you've watched all the previous episodes, joined by Sardi, CEO of Focus, Jarrod Morris, CEO, founder, Bolden. And today, because it wouldn't be 2025 if we didn't talk about AI, we're going to do just that. We're going to talk about finance in the age of AI. Specifically, I want to start by asking Jarrod, who knows all things finance tech or fintech, what AI is doing in terms of evolving fintech, whether it's automation, enriched data, forecasting, whatever. What are the key things that you've seen in the last 12 months or so that have really added value to that technology?
We might just start by clarifying that it's AI and RPA, being robotic process automation, in the context of finance as well, because I think the thing that those two things in combination are really driving for finance is the removal of a lot of the manual processing that's been typically associated with a finance capability as well. I think the obvious next question is, well, if you're removing a lot of what is manual, what do you do with the capacity that you have as well? And for me, it affords this really exciting opportunity to start partnering with the business and being a lot more embedded as a finance business partner and helping with decision support, business case analysis. But yeah, for me, for right now, it's automation of process. But what I'm starting to see, which is quite exciting too, is some of the analysis as well. I got an automated email from a strategic finance platform the other night to say a subscriber of a client had churned. And I knew that in real time by way of automated response. And it's because there was a trigger set to announce anything that was material in that respect.
And most of the AI functionality, we'll come back to the RPA thing because that's very true with some of the things we talk about as well, is that a lot of the AI is built into existing platforms as they try and sort of forklift in a bit of AI, or are you seeing there's innovative, SaaS plays with a specific AI function within it, or both?
I got to be really cautious. I think the ones that are attempting to be born out of the incumbent platforms are lacking. The ones that we're tending towards are AI native and have built as a SaaS product that's standalone, that's solving a very specific problem.
Going back then, talking about the AI/RPA piece, within our support function, we see the same thing. A ticket is triaged by type using AI, and then the ticket will predominantly be processed using RPA, robotic process automation, to ensure that a large number of steps are done in sequential order and done very accurately and efficiently. Have you, outside of our support function, have you seen that same approach, or have we implemented that same approach to the finance role?
Look, the things like invoice processing has been around for a while now. These aren't some things have been evolving for many, many years. I think what AI has led to is an uptick in the ability to do the nice natural language wrappers around some of this stuff, right? Whereas before it was very much if this, then this, do this, and it was a little bit more constrained. Right. AI certainly allows the RPA type processes to move from matches that have to be exact to one of the great things of generative AI is it can kind of go, it has strong confidence of something, or it can deduce something, right? And so that's where I think it's enabling just a little bit more flexibility around some of those automated processes that in finance have already been slowly being established for quite a few years now, right? So that's one side of it. The bigger thing I'm seeing in the finance space is on the analytics side, and its ability to go from massive amounts of data over however many years, and again, as long as it's good data.
I was just going to come to that. Cool.
That someone now, even with a relatively limited understanding of the data or finance knowledge, can ask really good questions. The downside is they're going to trust that answer. Yeah. And so, if you've got, again, non-financial people generally, I'd say almost skipping the finance, people outside finance are going to be self-serving some of that now, and they can just ask a question of some, and we'll trust the answer. So the question for me becomes, what's finance's role in making sure that there is really, really good data and really, really good insight? Because otherwise you're going to have people making decisions off the back of average data and generic AI response. Because it's very easy for people to chuck some stuff up in, Copilot in a spreadsheet. You can just say, what's the average whatever, or tell me what it's going to give you an answer.
Yeah. But if you don't have the domain knowledge expertise, then you're going to be like, yeah, maybe. So you still need that expert. So I do want to come back and talk about what hiring in the age of AI looks like.
Okay.
Skill sets and that. But garbage in, garbage out from a data perspective, probably, I guess I want to understand how a business knows if its data is any good. Presumably because we're talking about finance, there's audits, there's obligations around accuracy, etc. So what's the difference between good and bad? But I just want to maybe give an example of or talk about the way that you can build a data set, increase its quality in kind of a modular way. Because I know that with the way we implemented a lot of our automation in the support space, we started by triaging just what kind of ticket is this? Then we went, okay, let's actually go to summarization. Let's make sure that we've got a consistent, high quality way of letting, invoicing and the client know what was done on a ticket. Then, because that was so accurate, we could then introduce the actual workflow in the middle, and then we could self-service it completely. But it was bit by bit as we built the data, presumably, right? So in the finance scene, it's a question for either of you. How do you know if your data is any good? And then the next step is how do you improve it? How do you start to adopt some of this technology, but in a way where you can trust the data?
I might start, Ross, because I feel particularly passionate about this, and we've touched on it in a previous episode. But one of the coolest things about finance is that there's a dedicated statement to capture these data errors in the balance sheet. It requires that these reconciliations are performed, and owing to the double entry accounting system, you should be able to identify that through a balance sheet. And so I think what we're starting to see is the power of AI in supporting that reconciliation process as well, and surfacing the errors as well, so that actually you spend more time in discovery than you do in identification, triaging, as opposed to trying to identify what it is that has caused that reconciling error in the first place. But yeah, for me, it's becoming almost easier to spot now, because you can set up exception reporting. You've got a lot more rigor around your reconciliation process as well. I've seen an application recently that's now essentially scrutinizing transactions against accounting standards as well. And so when we talk like the natural large language models, that ability to interpret accounting standard and then marry your transaction against that to make sure that it's being accounted for correctly is pretty exciting and powerful as well.
Is it not whether the data is correct, but what the data speaks to that's important?
Yeah, context.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think if you just look at a bunch of transactions or a bunch of accounts or a bunch of products, and you do need to give a model a lot of context around, just because those things seem the same on the surface, they're not. I care more about that. Or, these, like for us, we have all these kind of agreement types that we call in our system, but understanding what the difference between those are. Like, I don't just want you to give me the total of things. I want you to understand that I really care about that, and not so much about that has impact to move this number. It's not going to know the story unless you create it for it, for the model, and that, just like statistics and BI has always been, like, you can create whatever story you want. And so if you're going to go to some data and ask it stuff, and then the first answer you kind of trust is gospel, and you're going to, and the thing that can be self-reinforcing, right? You can lead yourself down a path as opposed to something that has context and understands the business. So out of the box, it's not going to understand the business like a person does. You can train it to. That takes a lot of work.
I think that's right, Ross. Like, for me, the ultimate question is, does this make sense? And that is the increasing role of finance for me. It's being able to attach that to the strategic plan and validating whether or not that output is sensible or otherwise. And then looking at your sub-ledger data as well to sort of validate that as well, given they're going to be the drivers in a forecast that you can flex with respect to having to course correct as well. So I think that's a really astute observation. Like it very much is about, does this answer make sense?
As a tangible example for the audience that I've seen you presented some data on profitability by sector, on revenue and profitability by client type, our ideal customer profile. We've got a few of those. Is it essentially ensuring that the data set clearly delineates by customer type, or has a classification for customer type? Is it making sure that, again, you've got those sector tags or whatever it is? So it's not just our revenue line is X, it's actually going, okay, underlying, components of that are Y. And then that allows you to get the most out of AI/automation.
Yeah, that's if you want to use AI to essentially shortcut what you might have actually needed to do by doing pivot tables and using Power BI and that kind of stuff, then yes, you're asking for good solid data, and you want an exact answer out of that. Where the grayness is if you're asking for not just tell me the average profitability by cut, but you're actually kind of asking it to deduce things or come up with its own recommendations. And
based on our acquisition pipeline currently and whatever we've done in the past, tell me what the best sector for us to focus on is.
And so I've seen you can create some really good things that you said. You build your business plan in, you build in benchmarking data, you build in all this stuff, and actually then use my accounts. What should I be focusing on next? And you can actually get it to then tell you, oh yeah, based on what we know of benchmarking data and of what you're wanting to achieve and your growth plans, and if you've given it all this context, it can now work out, well, actually the best return for you is actually if you spent some time on this. Right?
Maybe client retention versus new sales or whatever.
Yeah, it can model all that stuff for you. But it's different giving you generic data versus data that comes from very well-informed sources that you have deliberately fed in. You've created that the intelligence, if you'd like.
Yeah, I find that benchmarking really interesting because your business and those numbers speak to that. But where is it? Where's the potential for improvement? Like if you're already outperforming revenue growth, you're already outperforming retention or whatever. What are your cogs like? Like what? Just all that kind of stuff, right? So to your point, it almost ends up being a very strong finance function that's not a human but does need that human to validate it. So like, have you gone crazy, and how do I stress test this a little bit maybe? I just wanted to also touch on Power BI. I think if I've got something you said to me in the past right, Power BI is really good at sort of looking backwards. Is it that it tells you, or is it just what it pulls the data in from? Like essentially the question is Power BI versus some of these so like the other options you have to bring in a lot of data sets and present. What does Power BI not do well enough that you need to look for alternatives?
It depends on use case, but Power BI is great at visualizing data that you would normally see in a spreadsheet, I guess. So you get some structured data and turn it into something visual. Okay. Right? It's really, for me, that's what it is. And it allows you to drill down, and that multiple layers is what people really like about those kind of platforms. The ability to go, okay, I can see it at a high level. Now click in and show me more about that, and show me another layer. And so that's where it can be really useful. But really you're still at the back end using quite structured data. The difference about some of the I guess we talked about forecasting apps, over the episodes, where you're actually now talking about sort of building models and letting it sort of, predict what's in the future, that kind of stuff. I mean, you can build that in Power BI, but I would say that some of the forecasting apps are better at that.
Yeah. I think to elaborate on that, I agree that Power BI requires that structured data set, whereas maybe some of the more modern strategic finance or forecasting platforms have these very native integrations into the subledgers. So that might be a HR information system, that might be a CRM, and that data is accessed through login credentials. Essentially, you don't need to have that more traditional data science background to be able to store that data in a way that you can then query. And I think that is part of the evolution of finance as well, is being able to access that data in a way that doesn't require such a structured approach.
I want to talk about preparing finance leaders for the next wave of disruption. You guys are both world-renowned futurists. There's nothing you don't know about what's coming up. Specifically the finance role, you have very strong opinions about this, I know. What do finance leaders need to be thinking about now for the coming 12, 24 months? Not all at once.
I might speak more broadly as to the executive team, and I'll let Jarrod dive into the finance leader. I think that success comes from everyone at an executive layer thinking like a finance leader. And then the tools we've been talking about in this episode around AI actually enable more people to do that. For me, what's the evolution of finance leader? I see leadership in the finance space actually becoming embedded within more roles, if you know what I mean. I don't think it's a job of one person. I think it's the job of everyone on the team. Just like we'd say, no matter what role at an executive layer, we're all in charge of growth, for example, right? Like everyone here is responsible for my success. Yeah. So I don't know. For me, finance, I see it as almost, let's say the technology we're talking about now is democratising.
I was going to use that word.
The ability for people to access and use and make good financial decisions, which means that I guess for me, the individual person, the actual finance leader, their job is increasingly technology focused and increasingly forward-looking and increasingly enabling others to make great decisions, not being the owner of all the decisions.
Thoughts?
I think that's right. Like the only thing that I might even add in that respect is that the finance leader, in my opinion, and we touched on this in the earlier episodes, is the one that enables the execution of the plan. Like finance at its core is about how to resource the execution of that plan as well. And to your point, Ross, there'll be a huge shift in terms of how you achieve that from a cultural perspective, whether that's through technology adoption or even how you empower the people that are responsible for the underlying business units to execute that plan as well. And so I think it really is about giving those leaders the tools that they need to be able to execute against that plan. And I think that it becomes very people oriented moving forward as well.
It's interesting because I think the finance role, payroll has to be done right and on time. The accounts have to be done right and on time, and the tax has to be paid right and on time. And so I think the people that get attracted to those kind of roles and the personality types and the strengths are often quite different from what we're talking about now, where you're wanting the finance leader to be future thinking and willing to take chances. I mean, do you see that as being a challenge?
Yeah, I do. And I've described that as a shift towards more of an oversight role, because the technology is here, frankly. Like those roles will be automated, and I think we need to start accepting that. And so I've always contemplated finance as being in two parts, one being financial control, which is chiefly responsible for the governance of that organization and tends to be a little bit more retrospective in its approach. The technology as it exists today supports that lane primarily. And so I see a shift to what I'm calling more of an oversight role, and how do you ensure that the technology is getting that critically correct. And then the other part of finance is the more kind of FP&A, financial planning and analysis, or strategic finance focus, which is a little bit more prospective in its approach. And it's more about how you resource that plan and how do you build out the management reports to ensure that you're executing against that plan. How do you build out the business cases to support investment decisions? How do you identify those acquisition targets to support the inorganic growth opportunities that might exist as well? In addition to being able to work across all of the different business units to support the execution of the underlying plans. So I think the shift is to more oversight when it comes to financial control. And then it's a little bit more human focused when it turns to the FP&A side of that equation and that opportunity to business partner and ultimately execute a plan.
Probably the last thing I would add is, and we haven't really touched on it in any of the conversations so far, but it's that just about every business in every sector that's something that I talk to is feeling like their margins are narrowing, is being squeezed, there's more kind of, more focus on cost control, that kind of thing. So I think that all the stuff we've been talking about becomes more important when you've got less room for error in terms of margin.
Which comes back to the whole why are we talking about this now? Why is the world changing?
Yeah, there's a lot less buffer now for making a mistake.
Hiring for finance roles in the age of AI. Like we've talked about how the role's changing. So let's talk about what that means in terms of the ideal candidate. It seems to me that we need a really strong communicator. We need someone who has business analyst type capability, so can see patterns and inefficiencies, which probably was that role or is that role already to a certain extent. What's changed and what does perfect look like now?
I think all roles in the age of AI change to having curiosity as a higher up the level of importance. Because now we can actually do a lot of work by asking really, really good questions.
We don't have to have the answers, but we need to know what we want to know.
Yeah. And so curiosity, interest, discernment on that seems right, that doesn't. I think that's going to be really important. There still has to be especially in the finance space, and there still has to be a skill and attribute there in terms of attention to detail and correctness, because it is the part that can't be wrong in parts of finance. So I think there is still that attribute, which said is really interesting because it makes it probably a little bit more of a challenge than other parts of the business where that correctness, you're willing to accept a little more inaccuracy perhaps.
Yeah.
And so you're willing to have people that are, that's right. Whereas here you're trying to say, be creative, but also always be correct.
Yeah.
You wanted the sound grab.
Yeah.
I think the candidate of the future is less focused on knowing the answer and more focused on how to find the answer, which actually stems from the curiosity that you speak about, Ross, but a deep desire to solve problems. A lot of what you're looking to do in finance is make a process more efficient as well. And so I think enthusiasm for technology, a deep curiosity, a desire to solve problems, but that appetite to go above and beyond in terms of how to solve that problem in a world that really has enabled that for us is a lot of what that candidate of the future looks like now.
It's interesting because in businesses that have a CTO or a CIO or even an IT manager potentially, well, that's probably more operational than kind of that C-level, they would be the ones typically with that discernment piece you talked about. Is this worth doing? It's a technology project. It's something, right? How does it stack up? But it seems like, where those roles don't exist, it's on the finance leader. Even when the role does exist, there might now be quite a gray area in many cases because it might not be a IT department project, but it's a technology project at its core. It seems like something of a unicorn role, what we just described. B, it seems like there is increasingly the CFO role or the finance role is a tech role at its heart. So it seems like that discernment piece is quite, who owns that decision is an interesting question, maybe. But okay, so if we've got
on that, I think that's why you're seeing the rise of the fractional model as well across all of the corporate shared services, and we're at risk of being a little bit biased in this conversation representing finance and IT. But you're right in saying that they can be a unicorn set of skills, and these fractional models are built off of the ideology that it's not reasonable that one person can bring all of that to an organization. And so certainly a big driver in my launch of Bolden was bringing that collective capability together and making it available on a fractional basis, because it's not reasonable to expect one individual inside of an organization can solve for that necessarily.
Well, it does sound like we're asking them to be amazing communicators, creative, really strong analytical sense. What else? I forgot already, but a lot of things, right? And I even think about, cog tests and personality tests. Very rarely do I see someone who's really strong analytically and really creative. I even actually just had two really good marketing candidates, and one was one and the other was the other, and they were chalk and cheese, right? So you have to make a decision which of those two is more important to me in this role.
Yeah, or can I bring both in and they work together to deliver great things, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a case of you need to build a team with the skills, not
Yes.
a person, because you are going to have natural abilities and stuff.
Which, to your point, Jarrod, I think that fractional model really does come in because, a business of, 50 staff, even 100 staff maybe, can't just suddenly go, right, time to build a team and just 4 roles and
that's right.
bang. But you bring in a fractional model that brings all those in under a single invoice. Sure, that's probably doable.
Yeah. And that's the point, right? Like, I think that we're going to see a commoditization of the shared services model more generally. We're starting to see that already. I think there's a desire for these unicorns that you described to actually work across a variety of different opportunities as well and not be necessarily confined to a single business at a point in time. So, yeah, it also invites that collaboration that you've spoken to, Ross, the different personality types, bringing the different perspectives, but all in pursuit of the same problem.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that unicorn. That's kind of why you've owned the finance role for so long as well, right? It's like you kind of bring all those skills together, but not to call you, don't give you a big ego, but so out of curiosity, I know it's not your business model, but have you found that you've had businesses you've worked with help grow, get to the point they're like, please help me find this person or people, because it's I imagine there's a limited skill set out there. It's a very difficult role, and increasingly, by the sounds of it. So is that something you've had to step up and help with? And when you have, if you have, has it been a pretty tough find?
That's the value proposition, is that I think it makes sense to in-house at a particular scale of that journey as well.
Whereabouts is that typically, do you think?
I think that you're sort of, and look, it really does depend on the industry, is the honest truth, but you're sort of looking at about that $50 to $100 million revenue mark, where from a CFO perspective, it probably makes sense to bring someone in with more of a commercial and strategic acumen, I think, to really then attach the execution back to a plan.
Right.
It's a role that's grounded in storytelling and being able to kind of sell the narrative of the numbers as well. And you might have that team of people that support the execution of the capability, but yeah, in my experience, that's sort of the sweet spot in terms of that transition. And is it hard to find? I actually think it's harder to find at the small and medium-sized business, because the unicorn that we've sort of described has an expectation around earnings potential.
Yeah, they do.
And it's not always accessible to those businesses in a complete capacity. And so it makes sense to transition the capability, certainly from my experience and perspective, when you get to a scale where you can actually remunerate or incentivize that unicorn appropriately.
Yeah, because you've got no chance of getting them if you can't. So, anything else you want to say on that one, or should I pivot to the next question?
No, I mean, when we've gone to look for CFO in that space before, the majority of the CFO role, what they've been used to doing things like managing the banking relationship and the shareholder relationship and the external stakeholders and the that insurance, and they've actually it's a very different profile.
Risk and compliance kind of
risk and compliance, yes, but it's just a very externally focused thing where they're managing instead all the other stakeholders. And I think we're increasingly seeing that, especially in a technology space, that typical structure of how a business is supposed to grow and is almost changing as well. There's other ways of growing now. There's other ways of getting funding. And so I think, you're seeing a lot more entrepreneurial people in CFO roles instead of finance people.
When you say entrepreneurial, I think cutting corners and wild ideas out of nowhere.
Look, ideas, yes. Opportunistic, looking for how do I make this work, not how do I make it.
Yeah, what's the risk that I can use to get out of this?
Yeah. So, and like anything, you need a balance. But.
So last question on hiring or people before I move on to my very last question in this series. If the role is changing so much, what's the right way to structure success measures for this role? Like, you've talked before about the changing role of IT, right? We always go about minimize downtime. Everything's kind of like, I don't want to hear any noise. That's kind of your whole profile.
Yeah.
That's
changing. Now changing to,
or should at least.
Yeah. Change to what innovation am I bringing? How am I saving?
How much new tech adoption is there been outside your department? What productivity or efficiency, all that stuff, right? So same concept with this role. What's the right way to set success metrics for a chief financial officer or head of finance in a mid-market business, do you think?
I think it comes back to execution of the plan. I think it has, and that's going to mean that the CFO's success relies on a lot of other people to be successful as well. But that's kind of what they're there to do, right?
I absolutely agree. Like, I think that's the role. That's the essence of the role. And I've been a big fan of ESOPs or employee share ownership programs for a long time as well. And I think if you want that unicorn, you have to incentivize them in that capacity as well, and really attach them to the execution of the plan.
Well, that's actually interesting. I thought it earlier when we're talking about the adoption process, like how you can drive that. But we have a profit share plan for our employees, and ideally, if there's a strong driver for efficiency in that they all win, right? Like that's the model, and I have no idea. Again, coming back to benchmarking, how good are we at doing that? Because of that, how much better are we at that than the others? Don't know. Okay. I want to ask one last question off the back of you recently getting on the tools and creating an app over about 5 days. What room is there now for the bespoke creation of tools to suit your business in the finance space?
Well, yeah, very biased here.
Massively. I genuinely think it would be really useful if you talked about what you did and how you did it. I think that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different parts to that. There's the ability to, and you need some technical skill to be able to do this, which is bring data from lots of different disparate systems into a single place that can then be used in a multitude of other ways. And so that does need some technical capability, but it's certainly not as hard as it used to be. And any application you're choosing to use as part of that tech stack should have the ability to do that. I want to be able to get all the data I want out of this.
So like non-negotiable, number one, API integration.
And not just API integration, but like actually test what's possible to do with the API.
What are the endpoints it can call on that?
How is it rate limited? And is there a limit to what I can access and when? So APIs are key to bring all that data into single places.
And are we evolving that to MCP now as well, like the AI equivalent of those endpoints?
That's right.
What's MCP for the people in the room that don't know? Romain was asking.
I'm going to be a little bit guilty of knowing it as the acronym without being able to recall the specific. Do you know?
You'll know it. No, you don't know MCP. Do we have to Google it?
It's not a term I use.
No, neither. So I'm asking.
I must admit, I don't know API either. So
let's quick Google break.
Cut this bit out.
MCP in finance definition. MCP finance. It is.
No, this is AI.
Margin control profitability. No. Okay.
It's the large language model.
MCP LL. Okay. This is interesting. Well, it better be. A component that creates an externally accessible API, MCP endpoints later expose a service to MCP clients such as LLM, chat agent. Doesn't actually tell me what MCP is.
I think it's like a common framework for how to interface with LLMs, isn't it? Like
model context protocol.
That's it. I actually, yeah.
It's an open standard designed to solve.
Yeah,
that problem.
I know of it. I'd have never. It's not something I'm deeply familiar with, but and a bunch of the models have now kind of agreed to use that as their kind of
protocol.
The kind of standard way to,
Okay,
so that you can have more of a choice of language model.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so
It's sort of the manner in which HubSpot is able to integrate with those LLMs, so that if you wanted to query your HubSpot instance, you can do that through ChatGPT via the MCP into that
Yeah, you don't need to create
instance.
something bespoke for every.
Okay. So I guess maybe just touch on the example you've got of what you did create, the bespoke tool you created, albeit for our clients, but I still think it sort of shows an example of what can be done. And then I'd just like to go to you and find out essentially whether that poses opportunities or is it too much risk or whether that, because we're talking about AI and finance in the age of AI, that's something that the democratization, as you said, of coding through AI, and I guess again the integration that you talked about. So let's talk about what you did first as an example to get people thinking, and then we'll talk about where you see that going.
Yeah, so coding using using AI as a non-technical person is known as vibe coding, right? It's kind of the term for that. It's now something that anyone can, with a credit card and an interesting idea,
Yep.
can go and do, right? So what it's done is it's actually created a massive shortcut in the ability to get vision to, I'd say, to 80 or 90%. Right, so I can go into some platforms now, and I can say I wanted to be able to do X. Actually, that's good, but can you do this like to be able to actually code using natural language and build at least a prototype. Now, that can be really interesting if you have a use case that you have. There's nothing that you can easily solve for just with what you've got today. So I've got this specific scenario where I want to be able to solve, and I'm going to go and create something very quickly.
Step number one, be creative enough to have an idea.
Yeah, understand the problem you've got, and you don't even need to know exactly how you're going to solve it, but you can let the system even come up with the solution for you. You just need to give it the idea, right? And then you can refine from there. Now, being able to then turn that into a fully functioning app that's secure with the right integrations into data, that does still take some skill.
Right.
I would say I put myself in the bracket of having some skill, not I have at least a knowledge of how to write code and enough where I can go into the detail if I need. I'm not a programmer day in, day out. And so again, I think there's still a need for someone else to do the last mile or the last step, let's say. But yeah, you can actually start creating bespoke custom apps to do specific things using natural language, and that's really cool.
It's really cool. Early days, I guess, but are you seeing that as a viable alternative for, I guess, specific industries or very unique businesses or particular size businesses to leverage that?
Yeah, definitely. It's the short answer. I would caution that with sort of balancing the risk in the first instance, because often you'll be using very sensitive data. And I think the connection back to IT is around managing the sovereignty of that data as well, and making sure that
the security piece is interesting.
Yeah, security is key. Also, the ability to have all this shadow IT stuff that exists that no one really has control over. It's okay if you've just got, we talk about all the time, if you're building an agent or something that just you use to do something, but if you're building something that now multiple people in the organization are going to use, or it actually is part of a critical business process, that does need some governance. You can't just go off and do your own thing in whichever platform you feel like today.
So is the biggest opportunity the presentation of data across multiple platforms, your integration layer, present data? Is that one of the better opportunities from a custom design perspective?
Yeah, look, you get all your data into one place, and it can be unstructured. That's probably the difference now. Doesn't matter what that data kind of looks like. I can bring it together and use AI to do some things with it that, as I said, the traditional structured analytics tools haven't been able to do.
Well, I think it comes back to this idea that someone is sitting there frustrated about a process, or they have a problem, thinking there has to be a better way. And I feel like we are able to access a better way a lot more efficiently now. The other caution that I would put out is the idea that you don't want to discourage the curiosity around solving for that problem, but you don't want for that to become a rabbit hole either that's ultimately very distracting from a role that you're asking someone to perform as well. And so there is a bit of a balance that needs to be achieved in that regard. Like, don't discourage the curiosity. You want the person to be potentially the early adopter, but actually, are you better off waiting for a more tried and tested solution, still being an early majority, but without the risk of all of that effort not necessarily paying off in a meaningful way?
Okay. All right. Any final thoughts as we finish episode 5 of the Finance Focus series? Any key takeaways you want to make sure people get out of this? Any smart things you want to say that we capture on camera?
It's this contemplation of the general ledger being the central nervous system of an organization, and the fact that most processes inside of a business will touch the chart of accounts in some capacity. And so the opportunity to partner with the business from a technology implementation perspective is twofold. In the first instance, it's that ability to improve a process for the business, but then the efficiency with which that attaches to the general ledger to support those more immediate reporting outcomes is definitely worth thinking about.
Okay, rebuttal.
Yeah. No, I think we've been kind of having two separate conversations through these 5 episodes, which is one is technology's role in finance, and the other one is kind of finance's role in technology. And I think in both aspects, it's the key thing is to constantly be questioning the status quo and asking what else could I be doing here. So when it's technology's role in finance, it's how can I automate this? How can I transform this so that it's now available to the rest of the business? How can I remove the manual steps? How can I? So it's just constantly asking the questions. Otherwise, you just fall into the habit of doing this the way you know. Flip that around. Finance's role in technology is we're saying that actually now, if finance's role is to really be the driver of executing the business plan, whether that's growth, whether that's efficiency drive, whatever it is, their biggest lever for that is technology, and therefore they have to be very active in the conversation around what we're doing in technology space and whether it's delivering or not, and adjusting if it is or isn't.
The last thing that makes me think about is we've spoken about everyone has an onus upon themselves to invest in their knowledge of AI. Everything's moving so quickly. If you would do an MBA or a degree or whatever out of school, out of work, you'd be doing that out of work hours, you'd be investing in yourself, you'd be doing that. I think everything you guys have said to me says this role needs to be doing that. If you're in this role, you need to understand the technology landscape, what AI offers, and what you need to be doing to leverage that to its maximum potential, because otherwise you'll be somewhat left behind.
Yeah, but I also think it's still pretty quick to go from novice to expert because of how new it is. We've talked a lot about, you only need to be a little bit ahead of everyone else, and you're the expert in the room. I think that you immerse yourself in it for a little bit, and you can actually, you'll see stuff pretty quickly that you can actually do that you didn't even think about before.
Yeah, it reminds me of just wanting to stay one lesson ahead of my daughter on drums, but she's absolutely run past me because I didn't put in enough effort. So same thing could happen with AI. All right. Thank you very much, Jarrod from Bolden, Ross, my boss, for joining me. It's been a great conversation. If you haven't seen all of the previous episodes, please go back and look at episodes 1 through 4. This is the end of 5. I hope that we got to see you at the events that we held on this subject across Australia. If not, those videos are also up on the website or available via your technical account manager if you are a client of ours. Thanks for watching.